Hey, Carlos.
Wow, what a beautiful group.
Yeah, we're just waiting for you.
And every single person is so beautiful. How'd you guys do that?
Filters, lots of filters.
Dr. Sunil, do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Sunil. I'm a member of this group for the last, I don't know, year or two. I work in palliative care, pain management, rehabilitation, integrative approaches. I've done some legal defense work for medical psilocybin defense in a case in Washington. And really interested in, and I've done a lot of work in cannabis policy reforms at mostly medical side, but also very interested in any strategies. And anyway, that's me. I used to live in the Bay Area.
Nice.
I got to Calahat for the old days, where yeah, that's where I learned my psychedelics and whatnots. And anyway, thanks for being here. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Anyone else want to go? Charlie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Carlos. I'm just pretty inspired by the work you guys did when you got that resolution passed. And I was like, oh, hey, all right, let's take that inertia momentum. So I got pulled into the group, gosh, like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, by Hella. And yeah, we're just glad to have you on board, or joining your ship, really, and curious what more you can tell us from down south.
Awesome. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so anyone else is welcome to jump in and introduce themselves to Carlos.
Hi, Carlos. I'm Cody. I'm the Community Partnership Director. Hopefully we'll be talking a little bit more in the future. So I'm just reaching out to all the local folks and organizations, legal people that our group needs to contact, and linking them all with our group. So you know what? It's a work in progress.
Awesome. Nice to meet you, Cody.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tatiana. I just joined Seattle Entheo like 2 weeks ago. And yeah, I'm just trying to help out wherever I can.
And where are you? Are you in a
right
airfield?
now, I'm on the beach in Grayland, Washington.
Cool. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'll go next. Hi, Carlos. I'm Jeannie. I also came from the Bay Area 6 years before moving to Seattle, so it's the home in my heart, even though I'm a Bostonian. I came to Decrim 3 weeks ago. A bunch of us are new. I've only had my first experiences this summer. Well, that's not true. Ayahuasca in 2018, but psilocybin just recently. And my first mushroom experience basically got the message that I have to be doing what we're doing here. So.
Oh, you were inoculated.
Yes.
You're now
happy to be here. It's great to meet you.
Mushroom clan.
And I'm working on the website. I'm working on new website content launch right now.
Got it. I was inoculated too on October 20th, 2018, and I did not stop thinking like a mushroom.
Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm just doing very little bit as I can to help out and support the cause. I'm not actually local to Seattle right now. I grew up in Seattle and then I moved to the Bay Area, and I've been there for several years, and now I just moved down to Southern California.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. Whereabouts in Southern California?
I'm in San Diego right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We need to get something going in San Diego too. We have a large number of people, but no one's quite taken the reins.
Yeah.
Michelle, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a homeopath. I have, I don't know, I've been doing mushrooms for a little bit, and then stopped, and then started again this year. I joined with Leo in Decrim, when was that? Maybe a few weeks ago. And yeah, we're out here on the beach today, so.
Nice. Nice to meet you.
You too.
What was your name again? It says Tatiana's phone.
Yes. So I'm Michelle. I'm with Tatiana. So we're together.
Thank you. Thank you. Leo, you've been busy. You got a growing crew.
Yeah, recruiting
Amazing.
is a full-time job. So.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Alani and Monique, if you don't mind introducing yourself to Carlos.
Hi, I'm Ilani Casey. I'm an enrolled tribal member of the Glinga Nation Raven Frog Clan, born and raised in Seattle, and in Seattle now.
Awesome. Nice to meet you.
My name is Monique.
Hi, Monique.
Yeah. I'm a member of the Santo Daime church here in Washington. So I've been doing works for some time now. So yeah. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Rob, web developer, helping to get the site set up and training our editors on how to use the notorious WordPress. And I just do general site admin stuff. So pretty boring behind the scenes stuff. I like to keep it that way.
There's something zen about boring.
Yeah.
Hey, Carlos, nice to meet you. I'm the volunteer coordinator for DNS. And it's been a few months since I started and happy to help in any way I can. Trying to recruit people and manage our volunteer pool.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Hi, Carlos. I'm Catherine. I just joined a few weeks ago, and I'm a volunteer, one of the volunteer designers.
Awesome. Nice to meet you.
And I'm Mary. I'm the one who reached out to you probably about a month ago to talk about how we can best tie in with the larger movements verbally.
Oh, right.
And anyways, I'm working on crystallizing our, primarily our website content right now, everything from how we introduce ourselves on the homepage to our mission statement, all of that stuff. So we're working really hard on that to get that sharp.
Julian here. Working on the logo primarily, been involved for about a month now, and big proponent for all this, and super excited to hear about your travels and experiences through all of this, and good to meet you, man.
What an incredible team. Yeah.
So what do you want to tell us about where you're at?
So I'll give kind of the evolution of our movement here in Oakland, which for some of you who may not know much about the history, we saw what Denver was doing on mushrooms. They had just put together their initiative, and a group of us got together and discussed sort of what's possible here in Oakland. When we looked at it, our own community, we saw and we were aware that we had people who were healing with ibogaine, people who were healing with ayahuasca, people who were healing with mushrooms, people who were healing with wachuma. And we also had some folks from the Wiharika who were healing with peyote. And so we decided that we would really focus on the relationship with nature and recognizing these entheogens as kind of allies, some might say, or portals, others might say, or conduits towards healing. However we see them, there's something special about our relationship with these plants that is ancient in nature in terms of our history with them. So we decided to push forward with a resolution to decriminalize all entheogens in January of 2019. The route we wanted to take was a direct engagement with our council, the resolution route. And there were several reasons for that. One is because it's way cheaper. I think it cost us about $15,000, but that was really for the marketing material we developed, which we've now sort of given away to everybody. We did a bunch of research, which we now put on our website. We developed a logo, which we paid for, a bunch of marketing materials that we paid for that we then put on our website and gave it away. And so at the end of the day, the real cost was next to nothing to go the resolution route. But we also, so that was one reason, it was much cheaper. The other reason was because, and I think this is the more important one, we realized that what we were doing was changing our community to be more open and friendly towards plants and entheogenic plants and fungi. And in doing that, we realized that we had to educate not just each other in the community, but our council, because we wanted to do it in partnership with them. That's paying dividends now, and I'll get to where we're at currently in our state of evolution on this topic. which is the community-based ceremony ordinance. And so I'll speak to that shortly, but because we developed a relationship with council, we were able to then go back in and continue the conversation with them and pick up where we left off with them being educated about what these plants do. And the third reason that we went through the resolution route, it was more of an idealistic perspective, which is that as we were looking out throughout the US at the time, we saw that our democracy was eroding. We recognized that throughout the world there are authoritarian regimes that are emerging. And really this is a breakdown in the functioning between citizens and their government. Honestly, in the group, I was the only one that had worked in government. And so when I said to the group, why don't we just do a resolution with council? It's easier, it's faster, it's cheaper, and we get to build a relationship with them. People looked at me like I was crazy because the level of senility that's out there with respect to your government actually representing you is very high, and understandably so. We live in a very polarized world, but having known these council members, I knew that they had goodness in their heart. And by the way, I know one of your council members, Alex Peterson, very well, and I would say he is a beautiful human being. So, so it doesn't mean that people always get what they want from their council, but what I do know is that council wants to serve community, at least at the local level. So, you know, the folks took a leap of faith, and we invested in educating our council. And this was February through June of 2019. And, you know, I've heard it said out there that it's because I had special relationships is why it worked, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Just because I knew these folks, well, I knew about half of them, half the council, they still didn't believe in plant medicines when we first started. They had no idea what it was, right? They still came in. We're talking about a very diverse council. We had 3 African Americans, we have 1 Asian American, we have a Latino, and then 2 white Americans. And so it was really about educating about what these plants were, because the door wasn't flung open. We literally went to council and sat there in the lobby waiting for somebody to open a door and give us an appointment at least 5 times as a group. So we put it in our calendar, we're gonna meet there every Tuesday, and we're gonna get there at noon, and we're gonna sit there till 2. We're gonna take our lunch hour, and we're gonna meet there and sit in the council lobby until they open the door to us, and then we're gonna talk about plant medicines, whether they want to or not. And then eventually they're gonna know we're not going anywhere. And so, this was really our journey, if you will. And so part of the big reason why we really encourage people to build relationship with their council is just like when you do ceremony and you get that big aha and you're like, whoa, man, I've just seen things much clearer. That's when the work begins, right? And I don't know if you all have heard our song, Plant Power to the People, we just released out of Oakland. Check it out if you haven't. It's a cool track. But in it, we say the work begins after the journey, right? That's when you reevaluate your relationships. That's when you reevaluate your life. That's when you reevaluate everything about everything, and you try to find the path of healing. That's what, for us, going to our council was really all about, was sitting with them and healing our community, rebuilding how our community sits with plants. And so to not do that meant we would have been leaving out of this equation a very important component of our community, which is the elected leaders. And we would have been turning our back on them, probably upsetting them if we didn't go through them, but also giving up a real opportunity to educate them and then be able to come back to them with an ordinance later, which we're now doing. So that we chose that route. It worked very well for us. It was a lot of work. We ended up having something like 30 meetings with council. We ended up sending them something like 50 emails. We had 3 big gatherings, community gatherings, some of them on the steps of City Hall, and then you look out and you see 150 people gathered there. So it was a lot of organizing, but it was just a lot of work. But it really, for us, it was in homage to the plants that offered us this healing to educate the world about them through our own leadership. So we do encourage that, just because it is really about changing the heart, speaking to the light, and changing the hearts of those in our own community, and expanding the awareness. So we got that passed June 2019, excuse me. And of course, what that did is it laid a baseline. What the resolution said, which you all probably know, is everybody has the right, as per the local government, to build their own relationship with plants for personal use, grow your own plants, to grow your own, to gather and to share with family, with friends, which includes holding ceremony without any kind of local prosecution. And so, of course, that only applies to our own police and to our own district attorney, not prosecuting. So it set a baseline that everybody should have access to their plant allies without prosecution. What we're doing now is kind of raising the bar and saying, not only should we have right to access our plants on our own relationship, but also we have a right to have the city defend us in that relationship. That's never been done, meaning that a city attorney's office would defend the public's right against federal prosecution or state prosecution, for example, to defend our rights. And that's what we're asking the city to do through this ordinance. So what it's doing is it's creating now a relationship where if we all sign on to whoever wants to participate in this program, and I'll talk about the program to the extent you want me to, whoever wants to participate in the program only has to agree to certain safe practice guidelines and principles, which are developed by community, by our facilitators in our own community have been the ones to inform those. So it's not like the city is saying, you have to meet these standards. We're saying we agree to meet our own standards in exchange, and here they are, city, in exchange for you defending us legally in case there's any federal or state prosecution. Now, some people have said, well, why do you need to do that? You already decriminalized. And two reasons. One, because we're taking back what's ours. The government works for us. It's supposed to protect us. These plants belong to us. We have a right to use them, number one. That's kind of idealistic. More important, though, is that many of the communities we're trying to serve, which in our case in Oakland might be a little different where you are, I don't know. But in Oakland, it's Black and brown and immigrant communities, largely. These are the marginalized communities in Oakland that have experienced a tremendous amount of trauma from the war on drugs, from the war on poverty, the war on immigrants in the US. And what I mean by that is that in this capitalist model, there are those who sort of pay the price and there are those who benefit. And in Oakland, the communities that have been most ravaged by these are communities of color and immigrant communities. So we said, as we were talking to them, hey, why don't you participate in plant healing ceremony? There is a lot of fear in the community about prosecution because of the war on drugs. So we began to work with folks from social justice organizations, from organizations working with formerly incarcerated and unhoused communities, from populations from violence, domestic violence. And the fear was very high about working with these plants to heal their own members of their own community. So we said, well, then what if we had protection for your ceremonies, to offer ceremony to them? And so then that's what started getting people more open to entertaining the opportunity to heal with these medicines. So really for us, it's about protecting the most vulnerable from prosecution. And we've created a program where folks can remain anonymous, and facilitators will be selected by the community-based organizations to serve their members, and in partnership with the plant healing community. I can elaborate more on that, but the basic idea is now we begin to create a culture of healing in our communities, starting with the most vulnerable, but eventually expanding to the entirety of the community. And we're going to be doing public health research led by community to evaluate the outcome of this healing. Eventually, we'd like to go to the state of California and ask the state of California to adopt a state legislation that then recognizes our ordinance as part of a state legislative framework. So then the state defends what we do, the city defends what we're doing, and at that point, once the city and state defend what we're doing, we're pretty much bulletproof from federal prosecution, because then it's going to cost them so much to go after people that it's not really going to be in their interest. However, we are going to go visit our Attorney General's office. We're going to go sit with them as well, explain what we're doing. Those of us who are comfortable standing out front, and then hope that they will at least unofficially agree to not prosecute. Because at the end of the day, this is about healing our community. And so that's where it's going. There's also a jobs component in there. We know that when we enable people to sort of get out of the matrix of trauma, we also need to offer opportunities for jobs, for nutrition, for housing. And so the next step is we put in our ordinance that we're going to develop a task force to look at micro enterprise opportunities for community, so that the revenues generated from ceremony, not from sale of plants, but from ceremony, can stay in the community, can help support next local economic opportunities to emerge in community, offering jobs, housing, nutrition to these same folks who are suffering from lack of those. And then from there, hopefully we begin to develop a culture that reintroduces plant healing ceremony into urban areas in a good way.
When you were working on this project in Oakland, clearly a lot of the indigenous churches were important allies for you. And I'm curious if there were any other allies that you found in the community that you reached out to and were very enthusiastic about participating with your movement.
Thank you. Good question. So the main participants were facilitators in the community, and then who were sort of organized through the Psychedelic Society in Oakland. The San Francisco Psychedelic Society is very strong, and so they were key in bringing community together. We have a group called the Sacred Garden Community, which is really more based on the botany and the science and the spirituality of plants, but it's growing the plants and teaching about the plants, and it's a very strong community. We also had at the time a small group of folks participating from the African American community in Oakland. That has really grown as now we're sort of pushing a more community-based model, as opposed to just decrim for the whole city. What we've learned is that many of the leaders in the Black community of Oakland and the Latino community of Oakland, because of the trauma they're dealing with every day and trying to deal with folks who are struggling against incarceration, against violence, against struggle of poverty and violence in community, that these leaders are really going through a lot of trauma themselves. And so we had no idea how many of them were participating in plant healing ceremonies, but it turns out it's in like above 70% level. So if you approach some of your social justice organizations in your city, chances are you may find folks who are using plant medicines to heal themselves, perhaps not as much of their community because of the fear over prosecution, but certainly themselves. What's up, Larry?
Hey, how is everyone? Thank you for your patience. I was downloading a very long Zoom video, and it's just a slow percentage click 1, 2. So thank you for your patience. If you haven't, I don't know where I'm at, but if you have any questions, throw them out. But I'm just kind of here to enjoy for the time being until you need me.
Larry has a PhD in what is it, Larry? In plant ceremony and integration?
I'm actually was focusing on integration. So specifically looking at ayahuasca experiences and these sort of different ranges of experiences that people have, instead of just sort of the unitive mystical experience, which is all you really hear about if you look at Johns Hopkins or NYU and stuff like that. So see the variety of ranges and sort of want to expand integration beyond therapeutic and show all the different modalities that may be beneficial given the type of the experience people have. So that's my dissertation. I also work with ERIE, which is Entheogenic Research Integration Education. We also do a lot of peer integration circles. We've been doing that since about 2011, which has been really beautiful to see community come together and share big experiences. We know we kind of do it as a talking circle, so we're all just kind of sharing together. And then also helping out with Carlos with DN and on the nationals side of things. So if you have any questions or need any information or research papers or anything, I'm the person that can answer that for you. So.
And since we're here to have fun, actually, I want to riff off this for a second with Larry for you all. I just learned this weekend, we were at the Detroit conference, Kilindi E's group, who has really done some beautiful work out in Detroit. And we were talking about, I finally understood Larry's dissertation about meaning making, because the whole idea is that we have all these folks that, and I promise this is relevant, we have all these folks that are emerging from trauma that we're helping support, who say, I want to get out of this trauma state of mind. And so we're helping them emerge, kind of wiping it clean with plant medicine, if you will, rebooting. But then the meaning making starts. And this is where we're talking like, wow, that's really kind of a deep thought is that the people that are holding space are the ones that are helping to create, emerge new meaning. And how do you do that in a way that isn't irresponsible, that isn't ego-based, as the person helping create meaning, interpret the world? And so we had a really great discussion about the importance of not planting ideas, but asking questions in the process. And I think Larry's really good at that. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and just when you look at the integration literature, there's a lot of words that everyone thinks means the same thing, but when you actually look at them, it's like, oh, wow, those are way off from each other. So just to keep asking questions, and what a great way to even do this work, you know, at the end. Like, we're always learning from people, so I'm excited to learn from Seattle too. So thank you guys.
So Dr. Sunil had a question. He posted it in the chat.
Oh, thanks, Leo. Let me try to explain it. It was basically, Carlos, I was just thinking about this awesome idea you have of trying to get the city to protect, City of Oakland to protect the ceremony keepers and groups in exchange for like adopting a public health, community model of regulation. And I was just thinking about the kinds of attacks that might happen, which would be also civil attacks. Like, for example, people who are licensed by the state, like me as a health professional. This is something that always comes up in the healing circles, like, well, those who have licenses, there can be civil penalties. There's other types of civil penalties too, housing and renters and landlords and all kinds of other ways in which the safety of the space can be, challenged. And I just thought I was just wondering if you guys had thought about that. And if I can just make one comment about meaning making, I'm interested in the spiritual, public health approach to spiritual health and well-being. And I think that's actually a secular question. And the reason I think about that is because the WHO really talks about physical health, mental health, and spiritual health as just part of like what health is. And everybody has to, because of the existential stress of being alive, we have to have some kind of way to make meaning of our existence and deal with the sort of reality of our existence. So I just think that that's a nice way to kind of secularly approach what is sort of the religion and this religion spiritual and divide or whatever, or lack thereof. So that's all.
Beautiful. Love that, Larry. I'm gonna let you take that last one though, because this is where you live, I think, more than I do. But I'll take the first question after you take the second one about the.
You want me to go first? Okay.
Yeah, you go.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So yeah, no, I think the meaning making, you're absolutely right, and we are looking at this as a public health approach, and we are looking at this with how do we do research outside of a university setting, because observational studies are in the real world. It's not in a laboratory or a clinic that like doesn't exist in the real world. It's like real world stuff. So this is where I actually really been thinking about how do you turn our heads on even research, how research is done, and so meaning making comes in that. The only thing and it sounds like you're including spiritual and secular kind of in the same kind of dynamic, but I am a little cautious around, some of the more sort of atheistic psychedelic researchers out there who use secular as kind of a term of sort of non-sacred or something like that. And then I worry about, like, you get towards that AI integration, and then once you lose the sacred, it's really easy to prescribe and make a template and say, okay, well, there's nothing beyond, or the mystery isn't there so much, and so it's really easy to put into a package. And so I think I love how you're kind of playing with that, because you include spirituality in that, but I know a lot of folks maybe don't so much. So it's something that we're trying to really just emphasize, the sacred aspect, because that brings us to lineage, that brings us traditions, that brings us to ancient technologies, things that our ancestors have been doing for years. And so I think that's a really important tie-in, but everyone speaks about it in a different way. So the way that you kind of wove those two together, I think, is good for people that you're talking to that are maybe more on the sort of secular, more sort of materialistic version. Yeah.
And I guess the judgment that we're making in that is that there is something valuable in calling something sacred, or walking a path that's sacred, or having the sacred live here, and that maybe this world we live in that devalues the sacred is part of the reason that there's so much illness, depression, etc. That's my own editorial, but there is when I answer the first question you had, but before then I'll just share the story. There is someone who is really doing a lot of work with healing veterans of war, and he's using 5-MeO-DMT, and he's doing it in a way that's really unique and different, which I won't go into. It's really amazing work he's doing. to do that, where it gives people agency over their dosage and control over dosage and all that. But he calls it the molecule. And I'm going to talk about it because when you start calling it the molecule, you're making a very specific choice about how you're framing the experience for that person receiving it. And I'm not sure that that is intentional on his part or not. That's to answer the question about the therapist, you raise an excellent point. It's something that we've grappled with. It's something that we've talked about. And one of the reasons we've been able to achieve what we've achieved here in Oakland is because we've taken little bite-sized pieces. And that issue we've not taken on yet. So maybe Seattle can be the first place to really take it on, how you deal with that particular issue. What we took on was we asked the question, how can we enable healing to happen in our most marginalized communities to support them? So that was the question that we really riffed off of. But eventually we got to get to the question, because now when therapists start helping out, we're going to start hearing the questions, okay, how do I protect myself? How do we protect that person? And then eventually we're going to have to start grappling with that question. But we're sort of dealing with one big giant question at a time. And so if you beat us to that one, we'll just take what you did and here.
Please.
Thank you.
Oh, you know, Carlos, you had introduced me to Haley's story, and she just joined us, and I wanted her to introduce herself to you. Do you remember you sent me a thing about her story?
Yes. Oh, that story was amazing. Nice to meet you, Haley.
I just wanted to thank you and Larry both for doing this meeting here today, and for receiving my story and for listening and for amplifying that to everyone in the community. It has been really incredible for catalyzing a lot of different connections, and I'm just so ecstatic to be a part of this community.
Beautiful. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
What kind of opposition or blowback have you folks faced in doing this? Because I've struggled to figure out who actually opposes this. It's, you know, it's just such an obvious good thing, but, you know, I'm told, oh, evangelical Christians, or, you know, there's all these tropes, but I'm just,
well, we have the privilege of standing on the shoulders of a lot of people that have done progressive work in Oakland and the Bay Area. So we're blessed to be working in an area that is pretty open-minded about a lot of things. Unlike perhaps if you're doing this work in the Midwest or the South, for example. However, interestingly, well, perhaps not surprisingly, opposition has come from folks who are more interested, not organized opposition, sort of one-offs, people who are more interested in getting into this for purposes of profit. Obviously, particularly people in cannabis industry who have seen an opportunity, now they can sell mushrooms in their dispensaries. So that's been part of the pushback, but we've sort of overwhelmed that with our arguments about love and compassion being something we need right now. There's no shortage of profiteering in our Western world right now, but there's a shortage of love and compassion, so that argument tends to win. But the other interesting place we've gotten opposition here locally because of the initiative focusing on the most vulnerable, and I say this with a high level of respect because they were my teachers coming into this, is from the more mainstream psychedelic community, who has felt that perhaps they're not at the helm and they're not controlling the discussion, because for us it was really important to push this as deep as we could into communities of trauma. That's our thing, right? That doesn't have to be Seattle's thing. It doesn't have to be Denver's thing. That's our thing because of the amount of trauma we have in Oakland. And so there's been a little bit of angst over that, but we actually just had a really great call with some of the leaders in that community, and we're sort of building bridges now. There's a lot of misunderstanding, but we've had 3-hour conversation, which was Larry was downloading, and in the beginning it was a little tense. By the end, we're all ready to work together, because now I think there's greater understanding. What we're trying to do here will eventually ripple out to benefit everyone, but we want to start with those that are most affected by the cause why BLM exists, right? The challenges in our most impoverished communities.
I think another thing too, if I may just jump on that, is there's by now there's so much research out there that no matter who's in front of you, you should be able to find a way to strategize and talk to that person about something. If it's end of life anxiety, if it's opiate addiction, or if it's depression or anxiety or ancestors, or I used to, because of my dissertation, I used to sort of practice that my elevator pitch, every time somebody would ask me, because that's the thing everyone asks, like, what do you do for a living, right? Oh, I do my dissertation. So instead of jumping around it, I talk about it, and you just kind of like get a sense of the person in front of you. It's really great practice. You know, sitting in a grocery store line, on an airplane, you know, like all the places that you might see people, start engaging in this conversation and try and figure out what's the thing that this person wants to hear about, to help them understand the importance of sacred plant medicines and mushrooms, you know? And so, so that's just been a great practice. And I think, you know, like I say, I have all this research. So if you even can kind of figure out your, you know, city council or whatever, you know, and kind of, we can strategize papers and things like that for each one, depending upon what they might be interested in. Little things like that are good ways. But having a few statistics on hand, just kind of on the back of the memory about a couple of those different points that conservatives may be more interested in, or people that are more religious might be more interested in. We've had, actually, I mean, quite a few groups that are actually, you know, Christian-based groups have been behind this, you know. I mean, I guess there's that quote that Cypress Hill always used, right? The seed, all the seed-bearing plants are here for you, right? I guess the mushrooms don't count, but I guess everything else, right? So I mean, there's ways to talk to people about these things. It's just, you know, you just gotta really kind of be on your toes and really think about it strategically, and use the right conversation for the right person. But
Larry, is your research, or have you compiled this on the website? I've been to the website. Is there like a library, a GitHub?
So I don't know the rules with copyright stuff. So a lot of these PDFs I just downloaded straight from the library, and I'm giving to people individually because I don't think there's any copyright violations. But I think if somebody knows the rule and they want to let me know about that, that'd be great, because it'd be great to have a library that people could just download. I just don't know if the journals that have paywalls and all that kind of stuff, which is also a bummer because, you know, puts a wall between most people and the information.
I gotcha.
Yeah, so a lot of the papers we do have on our website are basically open source papers, so something that you can click on and not have any worries about it. The papers I have at home are more, you know, journal articles and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Sci-Hub, because we wouldn't actually have to host it. We could just have a link to Sci-Hub, and then people can go break the law on their own account, and that would be fine to circumvent the censors. Yeah,
maybe we have a conversation offline, Decriminalize at email, and you can help me set up that because I think that'd be great. Yeah.
Totally, and I do have to jet, and I hate to hog time because I'm sure other people have questions, but there is a tension here about the for-profit motive or capitalism creating this problem. And I know we got some folks from the Libertarian Party in here, and there's definitely some free market thinkers who think that a free market is actually a solution to this problem, because we see government regulation is unnecessarily causing these disturbances, and get the government regulation out of it, let consenting adults trade as they will. And I'm just trying to understand sort of the tension there. If you guys could elaborate a little bit. I don't know, Carlos, you may have spoken more to that. I'm just...
Yeah, this is a great topic. And also I want to weave it into the initiative versus resolution route, because it gets to the question of money in politics. And a free market would be great if it was truly free, but when capital dominates, then it's not that free. And we know that because look at our Supreme Court, and look at our politics and contribution, and who's making the biggest contributions. And anyways, but I don't want to kind of get into a political conversation other than to say that an initiative route, and I promise I'll get back to your question a little deeper, but the initiative route costs a lot of money. And so the danger in a lot of cities starting to go the initiative route, DC is going the initiative route because Melissa Lalasani, really, who you all might have heard from, tried to get her council to listen and wouldn't. And so she did the initiative route, but it's costing $250,000 to $1 million when it's all said and done. And it's coming from one primary source. So what happens when our whole political process begins to become funded by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people? It means that there are going to be favors owed, and we have to be really careful of that because we don't want this movement co-opted by money. We need it to stay a movement of people. And why don't we want it co-opted by money? Because my own experiences, I've not gained, and maybe you all can correct me here, but I have not gained any particular healing value from these plants in a monetized sense. It's all been ceremony. It's been an engagement with the sacred. It's been the path. It's been community holding me. It's been people with love holding them. And if we lose that, we lose the message of these plants. It's not about a capsule and the compound, right? And you all may choose to disagree with me. This is my own diatribe. It's not about that, because we get that every day. We walk out the door, that's what we get. We get a capsule and we get profit and we get everything that the West has to offer, we swim in it. What we're lacking as a society is the sacred, is love, is compassion. And that comes through in ceremony, that comes through in being held in with the plants. And I'm afraid that a capsule on a shelf taken in private in front of a TV is not going to bring the sacred. And I think, you know, Larry hit it, we're kind of lacking that. So I think we just have to be really careful to not simply absorb what we're swimming in as truth.
I wanted to say that I'm really grateful for what you're sharing about in terms of being based in the trauma of this country. And when you feel like the pulse of this country and where the energy is at right now, and all these other grassroots movements that start with white people and then they bring on their token people of color, like later on, like I just love the fact that you guys are saying, like, let's start with the Black and brown people who these communities have been, you know, impacted so harshly by the drug war and by institutionalized racism and everything else in this country, as far as what's bubbling to the top now, like where are the feelings collectively now? And so, I mean, that really, I love that, because I feel like that has more power than anything. And you guys are probably going to get farther with that because it's so amazing. It's so revolutionary and it's so necessary and so healing and can be so transformative.
And there may be in some cities that it's the veteran community that is really the most traumatized. And maybe in some communities it's the indigenous community that is most traumatized. And what we're saying is go to in your own community, find those people that have been most neglected in this, and let's all heal together, and not make it about money, but make it about community, about each other. Maybe there's something there that we've been neglecting for a couple thousand years.
And I think another thing to add to that too is around, you know, Carlos was saying that there is not really a free market system. And I think that's a concern, is like, you know, look at cannabis. There's not, they might seem like it's a free market system, but it's not, for multiple ways, including the fact that you can't grow it at your house. You know, that's pretty huge, you know, like that's considered like underground market or black market or whatever. So like grow, gather, gift is such a huge part of this. And if companies, or if, you know, people, like, cause we're talking about microeconomies in the OG, you know, model, you know, how do we bring microeconomies to communities? But, you know, if everyone can grow their own, then only the really amazing, you know, people that are really paying attention, putting a lot of intention into it, you know, community-based, they're taking care of the community, are going to really be successful in this. And so I think, you know, that's, you know, microeconomies are part of this later sort of iteration, but really looking at keeping it sacred, keeping it about services, not the plant material, making sure that people can grow their own, share with community, be in community, grow community gardens. Like, wouldn't that be, I mean, think about how great that is. We actually have something that can beautify the world as well as anything else, right? Flowers everywhere, we get some more mushrooms around, great, fantastic. So, so I think that's a really big part of this, is like really looking at this in terms of getting the grow, gather, gift out first and making sure people can do that. And then, because there's always the cases, like once people start getting the, you know, the regulations and the licenses to do this, that, and the other, then they'll go after the people who don't have those, which I'm sure probably Carlos touched on earlier.
Yeah, and the free market feels free for those who have the capacity to access capital and loans. It doesn't feel free for people who don't, right? So people who perhaps weren't afforded a good education because they live in poverty and their schools suck. And then they are the wrong skin color when they go in for a loan. Studies show that Black community and brown communities have a much, much lower ability to get loans, all other things being equal. So that's not a free market for them. So what we're saying is, let's just wipe that. It doesn't exist in this scenario. So let's make it about compassion. That's just a theory, an approach.
Hey, Carlos, I got a question for you. It's a little bit more about the nitty gritty of talking to city council. But I think that's an important thing for our group right now to hear about, because that's kind of the stage that we're at. You know, we're trying to gear up and prepare for our conversations with the council. And so you said you met with them all in all, maybe like 30 times when it was all said and done. And I'm just curious about what that looked like. You know, were those meetings with individual council members? Were they more like group meetings? What was the content of each meeting? Did they kind of like build upon each other? Or were they all kind of just, you know, repeating a lot of the similar things? How did you go about setting up those meetings? I know you mentioned waiting in the lobby of the council people's office, stuff like that.
The standard process looked like this. We'd go to the lobby, we'd wait there and see who's going to come out we'd basically ring all their doorbells, so to speak, through their administrator staff person out front. And we'd say, can we talk to so-and-so in that office, or can we talk to anyone in any of these offices? And then we just wait for people to come out, and we'd say, hi, we'd like to meet with your council member. And then they'd say, okay, they're not in right now. And we'd say, okay, when can we get a meeting? Well, let me check. Can I get your phone? And this is inevitably how it went. Can we get your information? And we'll call you. So we'd give them our information, a little handout we had. And we say, but we'd like to leave you with this information if you'll share it with your council member and your staff. Council members for a city like your size will have staff. And so, we even bought them Michael Pollan's book. Regardless of what you think about the book, it actually resonates well with people who like science and research. And so we gave them the book. And nobody ever gives books to council members, right? So especially a current book. And so we did that. And then we would go home, and then we would send them all emails. Hey, we were just in your office. We want to meet with you. When can we meet? We'll be back there next week. Is that good for you? And we go back and we say, hey, we were here last week. You haven't called us. So can we get in to meet with your council member? Well, we can have you meet with a staff person. Is that okay? We say, yeah, that's fine for now. We'll take it. So then we'd meet with their staff person. And then we do the whole education on their staff person. If the council was Michael Pollan's book is How to Change Your Mind. Someone asked. And then we'd go and we would bring people that resonated with the policies of that office. So if it was an office like Alex's father was a doctor, and he really admires his father. So make sure you bring doctors into that meeting, or make sure you bring science and medical research people into that meeting, because that will resonate with him at a very deep emotional level. So we researched all the council members, and we try to bring people that would resonate with them. By coincidence, we brought in a doctor who helped with end-of-life anxiety, and then one of the staff person's husband had just passed, and she cried, and we cried together because she wished that her husband could have had mushrooms before he passed. And so we just bring the right people for the right office. And then when you go meet with staff, then ask, we'd love to meet with your boss. When can you meet with your boss? And it's just persistence. Eventually they realize you're not going to go anywhere. So then eventually we started meeting with their bosses, the council members. And then from there, we would ask them for their support. And in some cases, we would come back and meet with them a second, in some cases a third time. And that's how we got to so many meetings.
That's awesome, Carlos. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's really insightful, because right now we've had one meeting with one city council person, and they told us, come back when you have a movement, and I think that's kind of what we've been trying to do. We've been trying to build up that critical mass. Since
I hope you got a picture of this, because this feels like movement to me.
I think so too.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I think everything you just said right now is perfect. It really is exactly the type of insight that we need to know how to move forward and how to engage our council. And so yeah, thank you.
And by the way, movement is important to them, because it's basically show me you have votes, is what they're saying. So we held a big event on March 22nd, 2019, and we turned out about, 150, 200 people there. We took pictures, we got video, we sent it to the council members. They were, okay, you want a movement? Here's a movement. So we flooded their inbox with pictures of that. We posted on social media, on our website. We shared the website with them. So just try to give them a sense that this is, that you have the capacity to turn people out. A little more challenging here on COVID, but when you start having meetings with this many people on it, this is significant.
Sometimes they also don't want to feel like they're sticking their neck out, but they also don't want to feel like they're on the wrong side of history. And so you say Oakland, Santa Cruz, Chicago, Ann Arbor, DC, all these other places that have done things, including ones that have passed it. And now I think there's a little less stress in terms of like, oh, I'm going to be the first one. And, okay, well, actually, this is a movement. This is a movement, and Seattle is taking part in this bigger movement. So.
Yeah, you all kind of paved the way for us. So thank you.
How did you demonstrate that it was popular within the community to city council?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We held events, we turned people out, we did letter writing campaigns, we had people inundate them with emails. And I say this also on the receiving end of having worked as I was chief of staff to the city council for 7 years. And so on the receiving end of policy making, you got 50 people asking you to make policy on 50 things, everything from dog walking all the way to something really profound like legalizing decriminalizing plant medicines. You got to pick your battles, right? How do you pick your battles? It's really about people in their district caring. So Your job is to get word out. Your job is to show support. And that doesn't always have to be literal data that you're showing here's all the people that support. It could be, for lack of a better phrase, smoke and mirrors, right? That you just have a big event and you turn out 200 people, you take pictures, you send them, and you say, look at the support we have. Because people don't have, other than with Black Lives Matter protests, people don't have 200 people gatherings all the time. So if it happens, it's something significant. And so that was our strategy. And then we did letter writing and emails. But really at the end of the day, and you use the, I would prefer to use the term when you talk about your council, educating them or expanding their awareness, because they hate to be thought of as being influenced or pressured. They just like, what do you think, I'm for sale, right? There's that really deep guttural, but expanding their awareness actually speaks to what's happening, right? You all had this experience with plants, or some of you, and now you're like, hey, this shit heals. And you're on the front lines in your community of the message. And so who better to go and share that message with the leaders of the community? And so the personal testimonies and the science and the research is very powerful. And I wouldn't underestimate the power of those to win, even without a lot of numbers of people behind you. Because really, council is compassionate. Typically, people on council are compassionate and want to heal. And you have this magic potion you want to share.
Just takes one. Just takes one connection, right?
I have a question again, if I can jump in. Carlos and Larry, what kind of changes have you seen in your community as a result of the change in the council's law last year? Have you noticed more open conversations and more like less stigma in the halls of the city or the government or in other circles of life? I'm just curious about that. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about was the state of California, but let's, if we have
Larry,
time.
did you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, that was kind of Carlos might have mentioned this earlier, but that was kind of a big eye opener for me. Is just like, even just having the conversation, even talking to, the chief deputy of police and all these other people, even, having the big event where there's news articles, and now there's a platform for people to talk about things, and like risk reduction is a big part of that, like, okay, now I can talk to my community about this. Before I was like, oh, maybe I'm the only one that does this, but now I was like, okay, this is a conversation that's happening. So even just right off the bat, that conversation happening, and then, you start getting calls from these different communities from all over the place. Hey, thanks for doing this. We're doing this work over here, blah, blah, blah. So now the underground can emerge. And I think that was, something for me was just the realization of like, oh, we actually have less work to do than we might have thought. We still have a lot of work to do, of course, but I'm saying, like, there are already these communities that are embedded and underground, and they were just waiting for the chance to be able to sort of, share their voice a little bit more. And so I think that was a big part for me.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think surprising for me is just the how fast, once council passed it, how fast the message just reverberated through the community about the power of these plants. People were talking about it in bars. People were, just in the streets, people were talking about them in the Black community, in the immigrant community, and the Latino community, in communities that never talked about it before, because now their leaders that they elected are saying, hey, these are good for healing. And they're like, hey, shit, I want to heal. What is this? What is this stuff? I like healing. So suddenly the relationship, and for myself, like in my community, psychedelics or hallucinogens were things that another community did. It wasn't from my community, right? Like PCP in my community, it was just stay away from that shit, right? And so the idea that these things are out there that will heal you, or can offer you healing, not heal you, but will offer you the opportunity to heal and be a gateway into that healing path, was mind-blowing for so many people. And so I think that was the biggest change, as the conversation is happening. There's this place now on the planet where everybody is aligned, from the top leadership to the police chief to the people in the community, about plant healing. That's pretty amazing. If you think in an urban community, that's pretty amazing. So.
And what are you guys doing with, thank you for that. But I was just curious, you mentioned California and the state. In Washington, we have a lot of like city state. We're a much smaller state. California is like, you know, the 5th largest economy in the world, and so the relationship with the state government, I'm sure, is more distant, or, you know, different from the one we have in Washington. But do you work at the county level, at Alameda County level, or how do you kind of you know, take that to the next, like, or how do you sort of bring that into your work? Are you working parallel, simultaneously? We have a lawyer who's interested in advising us, but he's also interested in statewide efforts, and other lawyers in our state are also talking about that. So I'm wondering if we should work on 2 fronts.
It was really important for us that we establish models that are very local, because if we're dealing with, I mean, I was really grateful that when I had my experience, and I come from a very violent upbringing, and I was really grateful that when I had my experience, because initially I would have felt so alone, because nobody around me did plant medicines, right? Nobody did mushrooms. It was absurd to see that as a healing modality where I came from. And so when I emerged from that, to not have found community would have been really difficult for me to integrate. What the hell just happened? And I probably would have been lonely for a long time. But then I found Larry, and I found Bob, and I found all these other people. And I realized in that process how important local community is to the process of emerging from these experiences. And so it really just brought for all of us home how important it is to do this locally. So for us, it's important that Oakland do this, and that the state supports Oakland. And we'd love it if we could work with Decrim California to pass a model where the state simply sanctions local models in cities, as opposed to the state saying everything's legal now. Or decriminalized. I mean, that's cool, and we'll take it, but how do you build local culture in that scenario? And that's one of the riddles we're trying to figure out, and maybe there is a way, but we haven't quite figured it out. So we support all decriminalization, but we really like the local model. And so from us, once we pass at the local council, the ordinance, we're going to go straight to our state assembly and state senator's office, bypass the county. I mean, if they want to pass it, that's great, but we want the state protections. So we're going to go to them, and we already have an ally, a gentleman who is the chief of staff to one of the assembly members, whose family actually comes from West Africa and has, I believe, done ibogaine, or they have experience with it. So he's very connected with it. And so they have their office go to the state legislature and help us pass something at the state legislature protecting Oakland's right. And then other cities can jump in and pass their own ordinance that would become protected by the state.
And I think this story is just, I mean, just if I want to tap on this real quick, like this story here about this person who's connecting us with the state is why everyone should be just trying this anyway, because like he spent the entire conversation, he was like, oh, what is this stuff? What are you talking about? You know, like kind of was like off-putting a little bit. And then afterwards we were chatting him up, and you know, oh, his grandfather knows and does medicine work, and he knows what Iboga is, and da-da-da-da. And it's like, so he was very familiar. So, you know, we say oftentimes maybe these folks are just waiting for us to ask them. They can't do it on their own, but they're just waiting. Is their citizenry going to come up and ask? And then, because you just don't know whose lives has been changed or you know, healed through this work.
That's kind of the fun part, because you didn't know what you were walking into. We thought he was really conservative, and he was kind of teasing us and taunting us and testing us. And at the end, he's like, I got you guys. This is my history. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. So now he's a major ally. I don't know if I answered your question, Sunil. I hope I did.
You did. Thank you.
I'm just wondering about any last questions before we say goodbye, because I feel like we've gone over, but we've gone over in kind of a meaty, juicy, nice, like we've been needing to connect with these guys and like just stay connected on the West Coast and like with our West Coast peeps and like just stay strong with our roots. And I just think that we need to build these relationships. So I think it's all been beautiful, but just wondering if there are any last questions that folks feel like they want to ask.
Just real quick, Carlos, would you be available via email for any questions? Just, you know, quick correspondence for tips and assistance?
Yeah. And Leo, will you feel free to share my email with anybody who wants it? Yeah, cool. You know, I do have something I'd love to close with on my end, because we talk a lot about our communities that are traumatized here in Oakland, and a lot of them communities of color. But one of the things we've really been emerging into as a community is the importance of heritage and ancestry in every single one of our cultures, including what we in America call the white culture, which is, or white America, but everybody coming from their own, history and ancestry. And that's where we all meet, is the beauty of every single person on this call having such a deep, rich history, be it from Germany or England or Ireland or wherever. I once called Larry, I said, how does it feel to be a white dude in America? And he says, I don't know, I'm Finnish. And I love that statement, because recognizing that we all come from something beyond black or white or brown, like that's where we meet. So, and we can all support each other in that space of we all have ancestors, and we all have sacred, people who carried things for us to get us here. So just wanted to end it with that.
We're gonna do our ceremony for our group for bonding tomorrow, and there was a quote that I was trying to find that I always love today, and I would just like to read it real quick before we end, and it's from Ceremony, Leslie Marmon Silko's book. It's so great because it's a young man trying to find himself, and he's talking to the medicine man about the old ways, and he says, the medicine man says to him, at one time the ceremonies as they had been performed were enough for the way the world was then. But after the white people came, elements in this world began to shift, and it became necessary to create new ceremonies. I have made changes in the rituals. The people mistrust this greatly, but only this grows the ceremonies strong. She taught me this above all else. Things which don't shift and grow are dead things. They are things the witchery people want. Witchery works to scare people, to make them fear growth, but it has always been necessary, and more than ever now it is. Otherwise we won't make it, we won't survive. That's what the witchery is counting on, that we will cling to the ceremonies the way they were, and then their power will triumph and the people will be no more.
Thank you.
Powerful stuff. Thanks.
Thank you. Very powerful.
Yeah, and I just want to say again, what a beautiful group y'all have built. So
well done.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very
thank
much.
you.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
being here.
Carlos and Larry.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great group. It's a great group.
All right. Bye.
Bye all. Thank you.